I have played Hiyuki for several hours on the creator server, and I can assure you guys that you're gonna have a blast with her gameplay because it has everything you can hope for in a DPS unit. And the good news is that she performed quite well without Chisa, which was quite surprising based on my first impression of her kit design. But I can't really say the same about some part of her kit because she was designed in a way that she feels incomplete without some early sequences. But we'll get into all those details very soon. In today's video, I'm gonna break down Hiyuki's kit to make it very easy to understand how she works, best build, and how much of a damage decrease you should expect in her non-best in slot teams to help you decide if you should pull or not. Keep in mind that every footage used in this video was captured on the creator server, so some things may be subject to change upon official release. This video will be condensed with everything you need to know about Hiyuki, so grab your pen and paper or notepad, some popcorn, and let's get right into it.
Fleeting as the first. May the sakura incinerate. Burn this set away.
Hiyuki's damage types. I usually start off my guide videos with their playstyles, but for Hiyuki, you need to understand how she does damage to make good use of her kit design. She has different attacks that applies Glacial Chafe, which I'll get into very shortly at the playstyle section of this video. Whenever any of these attacks applies one Glacial Chafe, Hiyuki would do a corresponding damage called Glacial Bite, which is basically the same as Glacial Chafe damage. Again, Glacial Bite's damage is the same as Glacial Chafe damage with Hiyuki. This damage doesn't crit and can only be increased through defense ignore buffs from Chisa, her weapon, and this passive right here that amplifies Glacial Bite's damage based on some specific teammates she has. She can get all the 3 stacks from this passive to significantly increase her damage if you have a teammate that applies Havoc Bane and 2 units that applies Glacial Chafe. Since only Hiyuki can apply Glacial Chafe at the time of making this video, you can only get up to 2 stacks, which gives her 30% Glacial Bite amplification, 40% crit damage, and a small additional Glacial Bite damage, as you can see right here. Pairing her with Chisa and giving her her signature weapon increases the Glacial Bite damage from 4k to 10k for every Glacial Bite stack that she applies. And a lot of her attacks applies Glacial Chafe, like her first ultimate for example, which applies 4 stacks of Glacial Chafe, so you can do 4 instances of Glacial Bite damage, which is approximately 50k in addition to the liberation damage itself from the first ultimate or liberation. Hiyuki's playstyle. Hiyuki has 2 modes which changes her gameplay. Let's call this one normal Hiyuki and let's call this one ultimate Hiyuki. Let's start with what normal Hiyuki can do. She has this 40 bars right here, and you can fill one after a basic attack stage 3. Let's call these stacks blue 40 stacks for simplicity. You can hold your basic attack button and she will just spam her basic attacks, so normal Hiyuki doesn't have any special heavy attack. If you press her skill and hold your basic attack button right after, she will follow up with basic attack stage 3, which will now generate 2 stacks instead of 1. This will be very useful in the overworld, but in endgame you'll be relying on intro skills. An intro skill gives her 2 of those blue 40 stacks, and if you press your basic attack button right after, she'll follow up with basic attack stage 3, which gives you all the 3 stacks that you need. Once you have all the 3 stacks, just hold your basic attack button and she'll fire 3 shots from her bow, which will stagnate the enemy. Using the special heavy attack will make her first ultimate available, so you don't need any resonance energy to fill it up. Casting the ultimate will unlock ultimate Hiyuki mode and applies 4 stacks of Glacial Chafe, which will do their corresponding Glacial Bite damage as I mentioned before. In this mode, your top priority is to fill this katana right here with white stacks so that she can do damage as quickly as possible, and there are 2 ways to do that. Method 1 is to use her first skill to go up in midair and use the second skill to plunge down on the ground, which will fill more than half of the katana. Then spam basic attacks up to stage 5 to fill the rest. There are two major issues with this method. The first one is that the skills does not apply any Glacial Chafe, and they don't scale off liberation damage either. The ground basic attacks also applies only 3 stacks of Glacial Chafe, so you can trigger only 3 Glacial Bites damage. The second issue is that Hiyuki doesn't have any passive that gives her anti-interruption, so she can be interrupted very easily on the ground. Method 2 is one of my personal favorites because it's much safer against majority of bosses in the game. Just use the first skill to go up in midair and spam basic attacks until she plunges on the ground. This will apply 2 Glacial Chafe and do 2 instances of Glacial Bite damage. Just use the skill again to go up and spam basic attacks until she plunges on the ground. This method will apply 4 stacks of Glacial Chafe, so you get to do 4 instances of Glacial Bite damage compared to the first method. Using any of the methods will generate these 3 purple icons on the katana right here. To use these 3 purple icons, just start any attack and simply dodge to enter a parry stance that freezes enemies for about 1 second, and then spam your basic attack buttons to use 3 enhanced basic attacks. Each of these enhanced basic attacks will apply 3 stacks of Glacial Chafe, so you can trigger 3 instances of Glacial Bite damage. They can also parry enemy attacks when done at the right time, and when that happens, you'll hear this sword clashing sound effect. The parry window is quite similar to dodge windows. Keep in mind that you don't need to parry an enemy with these attacks to do the highest damage. The parry just makes you feel good and fully ignore the incoming attack. Now let's expand a little bit on method 1 and method 2. For method 1, after casting skill 1 and 2, if you try to dodge while spamming ground attacks, it'll trigger the parry stance as long as you have 1 or more of the purple stacks on the katana. When this happens, just use the enhanced basic attack and keep spamming attacks to generate a new one. The takeaway here is that you need to use the enhanced basic attack 3 times. The same applies to method 2. You can be vulnerable in midair while spamming attacks against enemies with projectiles, so you can dodge in midair as long as you have 1 or more of the purple stacks on the katana, which will trigger the parry stance for you to use the enhanced basic attacks in midair, and after using them, your midair attacks will reset so that you can spam it again to generate a new one. So method 2 makes you harder to hit and also gives you the chance to parry in midair with a very large hitbox at the cost of stamina. My advice is to use method 2 in single target endgame mode and method 1 in multi-wave endgame mode. After the 3 enhanced basic attacks are used, just hold your basic attack button to do damage, which will apply 1 stack of Glacial Chafe to trigger 1 instance of Glacial Bite damage. This heavy attack will give you 1 Snowforged blade, which you can see right here, and you can gain another one by not being in combat for more than 4 seconds, which only works in the first rotation in endgame content. Once the heavy attack has been used, hold your liberation button depending on the number of Snowforged blades you want to consume to do big damage. If the enemy has low health, be mindful of the number of Snowforged blades that you consume so that you don't waste damage. You can see here that the enemy was almost dead, so I consumed only 1 Snowforged blade, which was even overkill based on the amount of HP that was left. So I should have just tapped the liberation button instead so that it doesn't consume any Snowforged blades. Getting Snowforged blade is the biggest problem of Hiyuki's kit, as I mentioned earlier, and the only way to get more is to swipe a card and get sequences. The last thing we need to cover is this.
Restless already? Is that the best you can do? Restless already?
This right here is my favorite thing ever.
Holding your basic attack button in the ultimate form will continuously consume stamina, and if you release it just before an enemy attack hits you, she'll parry the attack and ignore all incoming damage. You don't get any extra damage from parrying this way, but the feeling is what counts. Team building. I tested 7 different team compositions, and I'm just going to give you the rankings in this video and cover the details of each team in a separate video. Keep in mind that all the damage was compared to the standard team, which is Chisa, Lene, and Hiyuki. Coming at first place is S1 Monye, Lene, and Hiyuki because S1 Monye significantly improved Hiyuki's liberation damage with an increase in damage of about 15% and a clear time of 60 seconds. Second place goes to Chisa, Lene, and Hiyuki, which is the standard team that every team was compared to, as I mentioned earlier, with a clear time of 63 seconds. Third place goes to Showkeeper, Lene, and Hiyuki because Showkeeper's buffs improved Hiyuki's liberation damage with a clear time of 63 seconds as well, but it was a tiny bit behind the standard team in terms of milliseconds with an increase in damage of about 1.8%. Fourth place goes to S1 Monye, Chisa, and Hiyuki because we don't have anyone to buff liberation damage with a clear time of 64 seconds and a damage loss of about 4.8%. This clearly shows that Hiyuki does more liberation damage compared to Glacial Chafe damage at the moment. Fifth place goes to Showkeeper, Chisa, and Hiyuki, which is just behind the Monye, Chisa, and Hiyuki team because S1 Monye is much more powerful and we don't have anyone to buff liberation damage. Damage loss was about 17% with a clear time of 68 seconds. The following teams should be more accessible as long as you've been playing Withering Waves for a while, in case you don't have Lene or Chisa. Sixth place goes to Showkeeper, Jingzhen, and Hiyuki with a damage loss of about 10% and a clear time of 85 seconds because the damage was restricted to Hiyuki and Jingzhen's on-field time was actually pretty long even with animation cancelling. Seventh place goes to Showkeeper, Yinlin, and Hiyuki with a damage loss of about 18% and a clear time of 88 seconds. Now let's cover her build. Emerald of Genesis should be your only alternative if you cannot afford her signature weapon, but if you do decide to use Emerald of Genesis, which I don't recommend, you'll encounter a damage loss of about 26%. Any other 5-star sword with crit will have about the same performance. I did not forget about Fables of Wisdom 4-star sword from Renacita. The exploration quest that you need to complete for you to unlock it is not available on the account that I'm using on the creator server. So if you have R5, be sure to test it out and compare it with Emerald of Genesis and let me know your conclusion in the comment section. Keep in mind that if you're running Showkeeper with Hiyuki, you can still run a crit damage forecast with the Fables of Wisdom 4-star sword. For her echoes, you should be running the Wishes of Quiet Snowfall Sonata effect. The focus should be crit damage Voidborn construct. And is it just me or they made this focused echo less menacing on the echo selection screen because they made him too short? 3 costs should be double glacial damage bonus and 1 cost should be double attack percentage. Substats priority will be crit rate, crit damage, and liberation damage bonus. For energy region, focus on getting at least 130% for the final ultimate. Talent priority will be liberation, forte circuit, basic attack, skill, and intro skill. Rotations. I'll be covering the rotation for the standard team composition. Here's the build that I'm using on all teammates.
Got a long bucket list. Good thing I've got time to check every box.
You first start with Chisa's skill and basic attack, but swap out of the attack animation and basic attack 2 times with Hiyuki to get 140 stack. Come back to Chisa to finish her basic attack sequence and cast her liberation. Cast her enhanced skill, but swap to Lene to use her liberation and basic attack to start the motorbike animation. Go back to Chisa and hold the basic attack until she finishes all the chainsaw animations. Cast her echo skill and intro with Lene. Use her skill, echo skill, hold basic attack 3 times and plunge. Use her skill to dropkick the enemy and intro with Hiyuki. Hold basic attack and cast her liberation. At this point of the rotation, there's only a single target enemy, so I'm going to use method 2. Use her skill, basic attack 2 times, plunge. Skill, basic attack 2 times, and plunge. The plunge attack counts as an attack, so dodge to enter the parry stance and use the enhanced basic attack 3 times. Hold basic attack right after and hold your liberation button to charge up and do big damage. Now basic attack up to the 3rd stage to get 1 forte stack, and intro with Chisa to start the next rotation. In the subsequent rotations, you don't need to switch back and forth between Chisa and Hiyuki so that Hiyuki can generate 1 forte stack. So all you need to do is basic attack and cast her liberation, but after using her enhanced skill, swap out of that animation and go to Lene to cast her liberation early so that the intro skill can give her more resonance energy and you won't suffer from resonance energy issues. Sequence explanations. The 120% increase multiplier from S1 applies to attacks that does not contribute to where her damage is heavily focused on. The true value of S1 is the increased range of basic attacks in her ultimate form, which helps in Whimpering Waste. The anti-interruption for basic attack stage 4 and 5 in her ultimate form, and the extra glacial chafe that stage 1 and 2 applies. But I wouldn't recommend you to stop there if you're more interested in increasing her damage output. S2 increases the enhanced basic attack by 125%, and that's her 2nd strongest attack in her kit design, so it'll do a lot of damage. Hiyuki can now get 3 Snowforge blades when she's out of combat for more than 4 seconds, or when the first rotation starts in endgame, instead of 1 from her passive in her base kit design. The last part of S2 is useful in the overworld. It allows you to stay in the ultimate Hiyuki form, and if you stay out of combat for 4 seconds, it'll reset her skills so that you can use it to build white stacks much faster and use the enhanced basic attacks in the parry stance again without encountering any damage losses. So once you activate her ultimate form in the overworld, there is no need to transform back to the normal mode. S3 allows you to get all the buffs from this passive without waiting for her best in slot units that can apply Glacial Chafe. The second part increases the damage multiplier of the enhanced heavy attack in her ultimate form. Glacial Chafe or Glacial Bite damage multiplier is also increased by 488%, which is insane. Don't bother with S4 unless you want to go for S6. Don't bother with S5 unless you want to go for S6 because her skill 1 and 2 in the ultimate form does not even scale off liberation damage. S6 buffs the first liberation and the second liberation's crit damage by 500%, which is absolutely crazy. The additional damage she does in addition to Glacial Bite now applies to everyone in the team that also applies Glacial Chafe, which will be very useful when we get her best in slot sub DPS. With Chisa on her team, she can now gain an extra 40% crit damage and 25% damage bonus for Glacial Chafe damage, even without her best in slot sub DPS. That'll be all for my Hiyuki character breakdown. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel. Our Discord link will be in the pinned comment if you're having any issues with the game, help with your builds, or you just want a place to chill or hang out. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.